Hello. Just letting everybody get in here from the waiting room. So excited to see all of you.
You might want
Kind of give me a little bit thumbs up. Make sure you're hearing me and seeing us and all of that. I see some familiar faces, which is awesome. Looking forward to a great session today. Very honored and proud to introduce Penijean Gracefire, which most of you probably know, but you're talking about an all-star within our industry here with neurofeedback, and especially with the integration of things like the Rover, which we'll be talking about today, is integrating the Rover into her neurofeedback ecosystem, the ability to do different types of stim from mag stim and photobiomodulation and things like that. So keeping this short to give her the time to give you guys what you're here for, I am going to turn it over to her and just so excited. I will say, if you have any kind of technical questions or anything along the way, feel free to throw them in the chat. We have some backup here to kind of help answer those for you. But we'll let her run with this. And again, excited to see you all. And I see Mike over there. Big old wave out to Mike and everybody else. Oh, Dick Gennardi, look at that, Bud from the past. But alrighty, guys, I'll sit here and do this all day. Penny, take it away.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It is wonderful to see some familiar faces. You know the drill with me. I am a brave little warrior, and I share my entire screen so I can navigate back and forth between windows. Um, I am going to kind of dive right in to some practical stuff right at the beginning, and we can absolutely elaborate on more of this later. But just to set us up, if you are not familiar yet with the Rover, it is a little handheld device just like this image, and it has a number of interesting features and the option to plug a lot of stuff in. I think one of the things that is really interesting about trying to integrate feedback with what we've called feed forward for a long time is that actually combining it into a closed loop creates like a different third set of potential responses. And part of what we're going to talk about today is just the technicalities of putting it together. And part of what we're going to talk about is just the clinical potential of why you would or wouldn't want to do it. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is that on the home screen of the Rover, the most important thing that you care about is this little option on the bottom left of the touchscreen that says pass through. The reason I'm going to point this out initially is that when you plug in your amplifier, Freedom, Discovery, Atlantis, whatever it is, you're also going to plug in your Echo that comes with the Rover, and the Echo is what's going to pair. You're going to plug your amplifier and your Echo into your laptop or computer, PC, and the Echo is what's going to pair with the amplifier. So you're going to use your Atlantis, Discovery, or Freedom to actually do EEG collection and base the feedback on those incoming live signals. But it's the Echo that will actually pair the Rover device physically with the amplifier so that you can include it into the feedback loop. Now, by itself, you can simply use the Rover. There's a number of different just general stim options that it has. I'm not going to talk a ton about the standalone stim options because today I'm focusing on the EEG modulated potential for the stim. But one of the things that we do want to consider is that you can absolutely do just a feed forward approach where you hook somebody up, plug in some of the potential stim delivery options, a micro Tesla coil, photobiomodulation LED, some photobiomodulation or AV glasses, even auditory. I say AV, auditory and visual. So when I said what we care about is this pass-through option here on the home screen, what is actually going to allow for the incoming EEG to modulate the stim is going to be this pass-through option. Now, what I have found is I plug stuff in and out of the physical device, which I've got right here. I think you can see there's a little blue light, which is essentially telling me like it's on and it's going and it's doing stuff. When I click the pass-through, when I click it from off to on, which it's not going to do on the slide, when I click it from off to on, it also adds a little orange light. When I'm going through different menus, or maybe I'm plugging or unplugging things, or I'm possibly even just, you know, like just reading in or importing different file settings in my avatar software, the little pass-through option doesn't always stay on. Sometimes it'll just revert back to off. So there's been a couple of times I thought it just stopped working, when in reality, it had just kind of reset itself to the off. So now I watch for both of those little lights, and I also just double check that it's on the on setting. This is the simplest thing that you can check for baseline, just to make sure it's working properly and it's actually pairing with your EEG. So we'll start there. The other thing is, once you've got it plugged in, and this is where I'm going to go ahead. I've got some stuff running in the background, which we're going to use for demo. Once you've got it plugged in, my other recommendation is to physically plug in whatever your amplifier is into a USB port, and then plug in your Echo into a USB port. And this, where's my little PowerPoint? There's going to be two wires. You can see from the diagram, there's going to be two wires that you plug into your Echo. So my Echo is plugged into my second USB port. So I've got two USB ports. Both of these wires are going into the same Echo, which I can't show you because it's plugged in. But once you've actually got those in, one of the things that you're going to want to do is check your global settings. Now, I should have actually currently, I should have all of my Discovery serial number, and my comms should actually say Discovery. So what we're going to do is actually close out of here. I'm going to have you do it with me. This is a little bit of setup troubleshooting we're doing together. Sometimes when I plug stuff in and out, and then I go to run sessions, it doesn't automatically every single time auto-populate in my login section in my global settings, which we're going to look at again right now, the amplifier and also the Echo. So one of the things that helps me to double check for that is I like to plug in both the amplifier and the Echo and get everything set up before I even open the software. Because sometimes if I do that first, it'll automatically populate. See how it did that here? If I open my global settings and it's not automatically populated a Discovery and then an Echo, if I don't see both of those paired together, sometimes just closing back out and opening it again will populate that. Okay, so these are the couple things that you need to do right at the beginning so that anything will work at all. Now, the other thing that we're going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and hit that for my own. Yep, we're good. The other thing that we're going to do, so I am actually going to run a session, pulling like a live session, not pulling EEG right now, just pulling garbage from the air, which means that not all of the things you're going to see are going to act in displays like they would with actual raw EEG. But the reason I'm doing that is because I want to have a live, I'm going to show you what it looks like when the different stim options are plugged in and running, and what they look like when they're interactive. Okay. Because first we're going to do practical, and then we're going to do clinical. Now, I'm starting off with a fancy one. This is an Accelerata-driven EEG, an Accelerata EEG-driven stim option. I've muted the sound, so we don't have those right now. What you can see coming in is just garbage from the air. My amplifier is hooked up to nothing. But the reason I'm doing this is so that we have a live loop so that I can show you in real time what it looks like. Okay. Now, this is going to be the main control panel. I'll show you all the tabs. It's going to be very easy to operate. just like almost any protocol that I give out, you should be able to just plug everything in, load the protocol, click go, and not actually have to change anything for it to go ahead and operate right out the gate. I am going to show you how to make a couple changes if you want. The most important thing that matters right now is that, again, absolute mess in the numbers because it's not really EEG. But what you can see is I have curated kind of a baseline set of Brodmann area and gyri just as a starter for this protocol. It'll come loaded. I'm about 95% it'll probably come loaded with this. I may swap one or two out. These selections are meant to look at everything along the bottom of the cortex and look at some specific key areas in the front and parietal sections at the top of the cortex. So I am interested in a front, back, side, side, up, down vector model where I'm trying to basically pull what I think are going to be like the main network hubs and how they interact with each other. So this is sort of a kind of almost for everybody starter protocol that you can then come in. I will show you how to add or change if you don't already know. It's pretty easy, but this is what it'll come loaded with, which means when we are doing Z-score training, that is the pile of regions that we're looking at the metric, they're pulling the metrics from to drive the actual neurofeedback training. Now, if you don't have a Rover and you don't have anything plugged in, you can absolutely run this protocol as long as you have the S-Loretta Z-score passkey. As long as you've got the S-Loretta Z-score DLL, you can just run this protocol by itself. None of the stem stuff actually does anything if there is anything plugged in. So it'll run just like a regular Z-score training protocol. And, you know, this is one of the protocols that we're just going to be distributing in the next week or two. So you are welcome to have it. If you are not running STEM, the primary feedback components are going to be auditory and visual.
Hello. Hello, Tom. Yeah.
So, there's going to be the usual feedback sounds you hear from one of my protocols. And then, obviously, I am a fan of putting the dimmer over something. Now, I say use my sound feedback and consider using the dimmer just because they are very usefully synced up together. But you can absolutely add any games. There's an MMP player update that's just recently happened. I mean, you can add anything in here. Just the most bare minimum that you're going to want to include is at least the feedback sounds, because that increase and decrease in pitch specifically represents the multivariate proportional feedback we need to get that optimal Z-score range training outcome. Okay, now you'll notice this dimmer window is staying quite dark. It's because we don't actually have real EEG happening. But if you will also direct your attention over, we won't worry about that for just a minute. We just close it. We can open it back up. Down here to these fun thermos, I have borrowed a few of these. Most of these are going to be threshold or frequency adjustment thermometers. So these are actually things that you will use to change what is happening and how the protocol is operating and driving. So if you have no Rover, no stem plugged in, you can run it just like a regular Z-score protocol. If you do have stuff plugged in, then here's what you care about. Off means no stem will happen at all. Constant, and what I'm doing, I'm literally just left clicking and dragging this. There's only 3 settings. There's off, contingent, and constant. That's it. Off means that you can have everything plugged in, but you can absolutely turn the stem off at any point you want. Constant means that whatever you set the Rover or your various stem options to operate at, constant means it will just run simultaneously, like concurrently and independent of what's happening with EEG. So you can actually run an independent stem without the EEG. Contingent is the setting that loops it in and actually modulates the stem based on changes in your EEG. So the contingent is what makes it actually feed back. Constant is just feed forward. It'll just stem at whatever frequency you've chosen. Contingent is what actually turns it off and on based on what's happening with the neurofeedback protocol. Now, let's look at how that works. I am going to plug a couple of things in. I'm going to turn it off. The first thing I'm going to plug in, now let me show you again the fun little diagram. There are a number of places to plug stuff in on the side of the unit. You can probably see that. And this is what I'm going to be using to do a little bit of a demo. And what we're going to do first, we're going to plug in some glasses, some photic stem glasses, mainly because they're big and dramatic and bright. If you have an individual history of not tolerating strobing well, maybe don't look or turn your head just a little bit, because I'm going to put this on constant first, and this should cause a light flicker. I don't think it's going to be super overstimulating, but just in case, maybe squint a little bit while I turn it on, and then we can kind of decide how visible it is. Okay, I'm turning it so you guys, you can see it more kind of maybe reflecting on my hand a little bit than it's like directly in your face. Can you guys see the visible flicker? Gorgeous. Okay, this is flickering at 10 times a second. Now, you'll also notice there's a left and a right, because I can potentially plug in 2 Tesla coils, 2 little micro Tesla coils, and I can actually control those 2 Tesla coils independently. If I just have one thing, like some glasses, whatever, I think it's this one actually that's going to change it. Yes, this is it. So these 2 options, the left frequency and the right frequency, you'll notice I got a green thermo that matches the green number up here, and I've got a pink thermometer that matches the pink number up here. They're all sliders. You can just click and slide them up and down. So on this one, if you only have a single thing plugged in, this is the thing that'll change it. So if I put it down here at like 4, see how very visibly that's blinking? This is blinking about 4 times a second. If I slide this up to, let's make it pretty fast, right? Notice how you can still see a flicker, but that's a much more steady looking light. That's because now it's blinking 85 times a second, which is much faster. Still flickery, but I'll take it all the way up to 100. You could still see the flicker because it's the photic stem. But this is how you would change the frequency at which one of your plugins would actually pulse at. So what you're going to get is going to have both of the options just hanging out at 10. One of the things you will notice is that it does that fun little jump. It's kind of like when you're at the gas station and you're trying to get it on the dollar amount before you turn it over to the next like couple of pennies. Okay, so this is flickering about 10 times a second. It's on constant. Now, watch what happens when I put it on contingent. Remember, not ideal EEG circumstances, right? Because mainly just what the electrical activity, the air, the hum in the air. I'm going to put it on contingent. Come here, buddy. Okay, now what you're going to see is going to come on, and then it's going to go off. And it'll come on a little bit, and it'll go off. And what this would be doing if we had actual EEG happening is this is set to run about 50-50, meaning that 50% of the time you're going to get visual and auditory feedback, and about 50% of the time you're going to get whatever the stem is. So, and it's going to be contra. So whenever And this is where, at some point later, I'm going to probably pull in a playback EEG and let you guys actually physically see it behave. And if you were on our session on Thursday, you saw, and we will demo again. But usually there's much more variability here because we've got actually like brain waves. This is a live demo of just watching how it controls it. So, if you actually put it on contingent, it will turn off and on based on changes in the EEG. Now, I'm going to unplug this one. I'm going to put it back on constant because that'll probably be the easier one to just visually see. And now I'm going to plug in a microtesla coil. How do we know a microtesla coil is working? We've got a little green light right at the end, a tiny little green bulb. Now, this is pulsing. Can you guys see that? This is pulsing 10 times a second. Now, I don't remember if this is the right side or the left side, so we're going to find out together. When I go over here and click and drag, let me do the right one first. Yeah. Okay. Put it back down on 10. Let me try the other one. I can never get it quite on 10. You guys are totally welcome to laugh at me. I usually have to go back and forth a couple times. Let's try this one. Oh, that one stabilized it. Okay, so this one's the left frequency. Remember, you can put in two, and you can either run them stereo or you can run them at two different frequencies. We'll talk about why you'd want to do either. Okay, so you can run a microtesla coil, and the other thing you can run potentially is an LED. The example LED I have is an intranasal one, which I'm going to plug in. And you can see it looks pretty steady state because left frequency is definitely running it. If I had two plugged in, then the pink one would be running the other channel and the green would be running this channel. So if you've got two things plugged in, we do have two channel adjustment potential. And if you've only got one thing plugged in, you just wiggle one of these till you figure out which one it is that controls it. Okay, so let me pause here. You guys have any questions so far about how to use the interface to change frequencies in real time, or turn it to constant or contingent? I'll keep talking, but if there's anything happening in the chat that our team wants to bring to my attention, y'all just interrupt me while I do a couple of other things.
Yeah, somebody was asking about the contingent is somewhere around 1.0 exactly. Yeah, it should. You see how that line right there jumps? The bar is basically kind of bringing them. There's a little bit of a rounding. So as long as you see that contingent line going exactly to where it is, you're at a pretty good shape. The arrow kind of falls within those ranges to try and help it make it. So it doesn't have to be exactly one. It will set itself to exactly one.
Yes, this one's got a lot of forgivingness. There's really only 3 settings. The frequencies are fairly precise. That one also jumps a little bit. That's why I was laughing at myself that I always have just a little bit of trouble getting like a right on 10. It'll come loaded at about 10. I often end up just hanging around 10 and a half. But you can actually make that as precise as you want.
Yep. Penny, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can. How you doing?
I'm doing well. What I'd be interested in is being able to see modal frequencies in a particular area of the brain and then adjust my stimulation based on trying to do some multiple to drive that right. Okay.
One of the tasks, yeah. Advanced question. What I am going to do is when I do swap over and run an example playback EEG so that the head map behaves a little bit more normally and some of these other displays behave a little bit more like we would expect to see in a real session, I'm going to also dive into how you would use those displays to maybe make some decisions. So I'm going to temporarily sticky note that we're absolutely going to talk about how could you consider maybe using a brain map or even using the real-time region of interest numbers, or maybe even the 3D head map options. I'll show you a couple of different displays and ways to possibly use it. Yes.
In the program, do you have like coherence metrics? So if I want to decouple one area of the brain with another, I'm going to hit around the golden mean in that frequency to help decouple the coherence. Is there a way of looking at those metrics as well later?
Do I have the connectivity stuff in this version? It looks like I do not have the most recent version of the software for demonstration purposes. Let me also sticky note that, because there's a couple of ways to discuss that as well. So we made part of the reason we made this 2 hours is so I can show you guys.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
You're good. You're good. We have plenty of time to discuss this. Do not forget these questions. Also, now that Tom is back, we may want to at some point towards the end of the session possibly demo some of the connectivity coherence displays. I've got the more updated one on my other laptop. My apologies. But I do think it's worth it, and I do think we will have time to talk a little bit about some of the more recent display options and how those might be relevant to making decisions about what frequencies you'd like to use. It does segue us. Absolutely, it's a great question. It does segue us into the conversation about why would you want to do both of them at the same frequency, and why would you want to do them at different ones? Okay, so let's consider as well the versions of protocols that I'll be making available as we go along. Even just the initial freemium protocols, I'm gonna do a 2-channel, a 4-channel, and probably 2 versions of S-Loretta. I think one of them will just be the S-Loretta the region of interest z-scores, and another one will include some connectivity z-scores, some coherent z-scores as well. So I'll probably do 4 versions of this protocol so you can run a 2-channel or a 4-channel Atlantis and run the stem. Run it off of a 10-channel Freedom, or run it off of a Discovery or a Freedom 20, right? We'll have a couple options so that pretty much anybody could do it at any level. One of the reasons that you might want to consider doing a 4-channel, even if you have a Discovery, is that depending on where you would like to place things, if you would like to place microteslas physically on the head, that will be a little bit more challenging if you've got a full 19-channel hookup. Part of what I prefer to do with a full 19-channel hookup is maybe intranasal LED placements, and then taking 1 or 2 microteslas. Listen, I know that it is always going to be a little controversial. People kind of do things in their clinics to try stuff out to see what works. I think that the microtesla coil makes a sufficient enough field that it is not useless or inappropriate to even just put the thing over the back of a chair that somebody's sitting in and just kind of hang it right around like sort of the base of the skull, back of the neck, almost occipital region. And even if they've got like a cap on or a full 19 channel, it is completely fine to put it somewhere around the back of the head and let it run, because it creates a pretty accurate field. Part of the reason I'm not as concerned about it being physically right on the scalp, it is true, the further you get away from the center of the coil inside your box, it is true that there is a fairly noticeable drop off a certain amount of distance away from the original coil, right? But there's a certain amount of permeability of that wave. And the other thing to consider is the specificity of the frequency. I don't think you need a lot of power if you've got specificity. This is something I think has played out pretty consistently across my clinical experience. I know that there is a lot of discussion around if we're going to use STEM, how reasonable, responsible, or within scope of practice are the various types of STEM. Pretty much everything that plugs into the Rover, I would consider to be almost a sub-threshold level of STEM. These are not extremely powerful options. We're not hooking you up to a car battery. Nobody's sitting in the middle of an actual Tesla coil. It's called micro for a reason. All of these are currently fall within what I would, I and the FDA will both consider to be quite safe and low risk for use because it just doesn't have the power punch that some of the other more intense STEM devices do. So some people would complain that that makes them less effective. However, two things to consider. One is that specificity is almost always going to be, in my opinion, more useful than power. You can take something that runs at 10 hertz and crank it up to, multiple Gauss worth of power. I mean, I think this is what happens a lot in STEM therapy deliveries is that people kind of confuse the power or the intensity of the delivery with how effective it's going to be. I don't think that's necessarily true all the time. So the two things that we're going to talk about is if you can actually pick a frequency, a particular frequency, and stim at that with a certain amount of like intent, I think that actually has more utility than just a super powerful wave that doesn't have that type of modulation. But what really makes the lower threshold safer stems, I think, more effective is actually looping them together with the EEG so that they are then modulated by your actual live brain activity. Now, if you're doing that, you actually don't need very much power at all for the brain to recognize and make relevant. I would even go so far as to say this is basically sensory feedback. We're asking the brain, we're making those bids for attention just in different ways. Whenever we do audio or visual, the dimmer, the sounds, the games, those are all bids for attention. We're using different sensory inputs to ask the brain to give us attention or to prioritize orientation in space, right? When you use a pulsed electromagnetic field, or a photobiomodulation LED, folded glasses, the vibration from the binaural beat option. When you do all of those are essentially a sensory input, and anything that we can modulate in real time based on brain change becomes way more salient and more of a priority, which means you can do extremely low amounts of STEM and still get a salient prioritization because it's actually modulating in real time with your brain activity. This is how neurofeedback works. We're basically just tapping into the same thing. Remember, feedback versus feed forward. I still think even when you don't have it as part of a feedback loop, I still am in favor of just lower power STEM options with more specificity, meaning being very selective about how you choose the frequencies you want to pulse it at. There are STEM options out there that don't have a lot of or any pulse, like some photobiomodulation is just steady state. It's going to give you a wavelength of light. It's not going to pulse that light. It's not going to turn it off and on 10 times or 40 times a second. It's just going to be a steady state wavelength of light. It'll have a specific nanometer, and that will carry some useful information, hopefully a therapeutic effects worth of information to your central nervous system. However, if you take that same wavelength of light and you turn it off and on a number of times a second that we recognize as, a frequency, how frequently does it turn off and on? You pulse it at a frequency, you're going to have potentially the utility or effect of the wavelength itself, and then the effect of the pulsing. So when we take those two things, which we already know are useful, the effect of the microtesla and the effect of the pulsing, and then we integrate that in with an actual EEG modulation, what's happening is that this is another choice that I have made intentionally and recommend that you preserve. There are ways to absolutely change this option in the event wizard. I recommend you preserve the way I've set it up, and here's the rationale. Right now, when the auditory and the visual feedback is on, the stim is off. And when the auditory and visual feedback fall out of spec, the stim kicks on. So I am not actually doing auditory and visual feedback at the same time I'm doing STEM. I've set the ranges of the protocol to basically do auditory visual feedback roughly half of the time, which means you're going to get STEM roughly half the time. So as the variability of the EEG occurs, you're coming in and out of the feedback ranges. Even when you drop out of the feedback range and the dimmer gets darker or the sounds get quieter or drop out, that's when the STEM kicks in. I've done it where they're all running at the same time. The two reasons that I have deliberately put it so that they're contra or complementary is one of the things that we have been experiencing with the FDA being, I think, understandably a little bit fussy about the pioneering work some of us are doing in the field. One of the things that they have not liked is the idea of us doing actual STEM at the same time we're doing EEG feedback. I think you could do them at the same time and it works. There's some nice pairing that happens there, as it can be pretty clinically effective. For some reason, they do not love it. And one of the easier ways to solve that is to simply not do them at the same time. So this is specific, these protocol designs are set up to specifically adhere to that FDA stated preference where you're not doing STEM at the same time you're doing EEG feedback. That may change as more studies come out in the near future because a lot of us are fairly interested in combining STEM and EEG, but they really don't like it at the same time for now. So all these protocols that I'm going to give you that are relevant to the Rover, all of them are set up so that the EEG feedback is not on, the audiovisual feedback is not on at the same time that the STEM is. However, because they're in the same closed loop, there is an interdependency that allows for them to still have some Hebbian principal wiring. And it also means regardless of what's happening in the session, you're not without feedback. And even though I don't think it works this simplistically, I don't think if you choose 10 hertz, you're just going to suddenly make more 10 hertz in the brain. It's not quite like that. If you choose 40, you're not just going to suddenly have a big gamma wash. It's not quite like that. But here is what is true. If you've got somebody with very low alpha or very low gamma or very low anything, because remember, this is set up for you to be able to run it from a 0 to 100. So I've topped you out at 100 hertz because once you get a little once you get beyond about 100, 120, you start having different effects from some of the higher frequency stems. So on these, I've just topped you out at 100, and I'm like, just stay in the range that we are somewhat familiar based on research with the cognitive effects that we assume you're going to have. But between, wherever you hang out in here, you can pick anything. So that means your specificity is high. So if someone has, and I'm just going to use alpha and gamma because we're kind of familiar with that. There's been like a lot of discussion and some publication around it. If you do have somebody that has low alpha, which commonly does occur in the occipital or parietal regions of the head, and you do just drop a couple of Tesla coils over the back of the seat and just let it pulse at 10 hertz, that means every time that they're dropping out of the feedback range, they're getting a bit of an alpha boost. So it's like they're spending the entire time. I think that, and I'm gonna say this. I know it's heretical, but I'm gonna say it anyways. You know how I am. I don't fully ascribe to the old school learning behavioral model that the sounds or the visuals or whatever are like a straight reward framework. To me, it is an informational framework. And because of that, I think that the sound going in and out, like I think the negative space is just as relevant for learning as the sound itself. So I think how frequently we give information or feedback to some degree will determine the brain's capacity to learn or to discriminate or discern what it is we're asking it to pay attention to. So this is another reason why I like to separate out the STEM to some degree from the auditory and visual feedback. So the brain is getting regular information, but it's a little what's what I'm looking for? I don't think it's not contralateral. It's a little, I want to just say complementary. That's not quite what I'm going for. Long day, short night, not enough caffeine. I'll think of it later. But I've seen some very nice responses using this setup, and it keeps us within the ranges of what currently is the preferences of our regulatory bodies that we would like to stay in good favor with. So let me pause here. Comments or questions before I move on to the next couple of things. I haven't forgotten your questions.
Yeah.
Dr.
I have another, but I don't want to
Okay.
take away from other people having an opportunity
in
to
there.
ask.
We've got time.
Okay. My interest in the specificity is not that the frequencies that we use aren't very important, because obviously they are on STEM. But I'm interested in being able to target the impact. If I'm using a microtesla coil, it's going to affect the whole brain. I'm interested in the impact in all the major hubs of the salience network, the default mode network, the executive function network, and being able to see the effect of my stimulation and how it changes those relationships. So in the other than the SW Loretta setup, how does the front, back, left, right, up, down affect being able to really monitor those sites carefully?
Here's where I'm going to do a quick pause because I've got a few other things that I'm going to show you guys.
Okay.
Tom and or Rob and or anyone currently, do you have available at some point that we could do later in the webinar a demo mode of some of the more recent displays that you guys have debuted that shows more of the details of connectivity or network? Or
Maybe
something?
in a little bit. Yes, I'm working on that.
Okay.
Yes.
We can shoot for like maybe the last 30, 40 minutes of the webinar to maybe look at some of that.
Sure.
Okay, if you think we've got something. Because there are some more there are some more recent and modern displays available. I have not used any of them in these demos, mainly because there, as you guys know, there is a range of interest, and the Venn diagram of how do I look at that versus now I feel very overwhelmed. That's a very particular overlap. So I do think it's worth looking at. But part of the reason I haven't included those is just because at some point people get a little eyes glazed over, and I have learned not to Gracefire hose people too much these days.
I've been accused of that myself. Thank you, Penny.
But still interesting, still relevant. Would love to show you guys some fancy stuff soon. What I'm going to do now is stop this pulling an electrical hum from the air, because you guys saw stuff come off and on. I think you understand the constant contingent off component. Like, I think the practicality is clear. What I'd like to do actually is pull in an EEG file and play it back. We're going to just do a real quick.
I can show some phase type stuff if you want.
Yes, that will be lovely.
Okay, I brought up some of the new screens just to look at.
Would you guys like to take like maybe a 10-minute jump over to look at some of that and then come back and continue on with what we're doing? I think it's worth it because it's pretty. Let me unshare. You're ready to share, Tom.
Okay. I just brought some of these up. This is experimental. People seeing my screen?
Look how fun that is.
Okay, by way of introduction, we are introducing another layer of software, which we're calling BrainMaster. You all know about BrainMaster. Well, this is BrainCaster. It is network based. It allows you to control a fleet of workstations. You can control them over a local area network, and we also are creating a global backbone which allows you to control these remote workstations moving into homes as well. But while we're at it, we're also designing a lot of new innovative types of displays. So this one here is phase and cross-frequency coupling in one display. So you remember how when we teach coherence, we talk about the phase angle between two sites, and we talk about the fact that if the phase angle is relatively constant, then you have high coherence. So this is displaying those phase angles across different sites. Cross-frequency coupling. So, for example, delta to theta coupling, delta to alpha coupling, delta to SMR, delta to beta, delta to high beta, delta to gamma. The one on the lower left is very interesting because it's the delta to gamma phase coupling. And because then we have all these different bands, we're able to look at the coupling between them. We can pick channel 2, we can pick channel 1, and I'm also getting rewards because this is one of the new training screens. So we've simplified the training screen, gotten it so it's a little more crisp, and this again can be controlled remotely. And I'll show you then, in addition to this cross phase, we have something called the lab. And the lab is here, for example, this is phase space. It's actually the imaginary versus the real of the signal. And when the signals are cross-coupled and coherent, these become circles. So this is a live, real-time display of the cross-channel coupling. And we think this can be used for training as well. And we also then have a phase amplitude coupling. This screen here shows the phase. You also see I'm getting session progress notes. This whole thing is very automated now. And incidentally, it runs on a whole range of platforms now. The BrainCaster is no longer limited to just PCs. It runs on PCs, tablets, phones, and a new dedicated piece of hardware we're creating, which is a little standalone unit. This device I'm holding contains the complete software and operating system of BrainCaster. So it's very exciting. This becomes a scalable design where this thing, with an Atlantis or a Discovery or the new biofeedback system, or a Freedom, this sits on the web. This is a network-based device. It sits on your Wi-Fi. It also creates a hotspot, so I can access these screens on my phone just as easily, even from another room. And also we have then a new theta, alpha, gamma coupling. People are very interested in cross-frequency coupling now. And this is the TAG protocol, which people have been reading about, hearing about. And this design then monitors the theta, the alpha, and the gamma. And when the theta and the gamma, see, you've got a within-channel coupling meter now. And you can set a reward condition so that when they couple to a certain extent, so theta and gamma are going up together, now you get a reward. So these are some of the new things. We also have a Z-score capability going in. We have phase. We have envelope displays. And we also have a new full suite of games, of course. All the games you're used to. For example, Brain Mirror is a very exciting display. People like to use it a lot. And here we have an enhanced brain mirror display that runs right along. And as you can see up on top, I can stop the game. I can pick another game. So, for example, I guess I could pick any of these. We have all these redone. Wing Command has been redone. So this is yet another series of opportunities. And this is very lean. This does not require a high-powered computer. I have this running on a $135 laptop, and it works just fine. So it's really been made a lot more lean, and it's an option that we think is more scalable. So as you want to move into homes or have more in your office, this platform gives you an opportunity to deploy Discoveries, Atlantises, Freedoms remotely, and actually controlling them remotely. This could be the screen of the supervisor, of the person watching the and some of them are a little more simple and easier to. Here's brain cells has been made a little more pretty, if you will. And we also have a biofeedback module that's working quite well.
Tom, do you have neural blocks in that version that you have there, or not yet?
Do I have what?
Neural blocks. The
Yes.
version.
Yes, I do. If you go to stop the game, thank you, Bill. Go to games. There's NeuroBlocks. This was designed by our Ethan. So we provide a toolkit with this now. BrainCaster comes with a game development toolkit, and you can write your games in a widely used language. And I'm going to quickly, let's see, I don't want this, I just want this. So there's the NeuroBlocks. It runs unattended, which it should. Then I'm going to show real quickly there's a new biofeedback system. I'm putting it on my hand right now, and you can actually get everything on just a couple of fingers. I'm putting a GSR, I'm putting a HRV, and I'm putting temperature in here. And so if I close this and close this for now, this is your home screen, and I can proceed here and I can do live biofeedback. And there it is, and it's running just like that. This is live, this is not a playback. This is my heart, this is my blood pulse, temperature, GSR, and heart rate. And it's working just like that. So we're very excited about this new biofeedback capability. So in addition to this very nice monitor, which then saves the files, does all kinds of nice stuff, we also have, built into BrainCaster, this is your control screen, and these QR codes let your telephone or your mouse pad or whatever you have, your iPad, communicate with BrainCaster. Also, it has the ability for supervised use where you basically give cards, and your client would get these cards on their machine. They don't get the full control panel. They just get this. So this allows them, say Trainee 02 has 5 of 40 sessions, BrainCaster Demo has 7 of 20, et cetera, et cetera. You can request a QEEG, and incidentally, we now have video integrated with the EEG. We have a lot of new video EEG features using your built-in camera, but I'll just bring up very quickly a biofeedback training screen. So if I breathe nicely, And I'm going. I'm getting calm finally. So all I need is a Rover, and then I'll be even more relaxed.
And spam you with some 10 hertz. Maybe some, what is the Schumann frequency? 7.84?
7.8, yep.
7.8.
So this is the new biofeedback capability that's built in. It's a beautiful little unit, and we're supporting it now.
We've got a couple questions on when a lot of this is going to go live, Tom.
In right after ISNR.
Okay.
Yeah, our goal is to announce, show, display, and then roll out ISNR and post.
Mm-hmm.
I'll show you something else. If I start here.
You guys are really getting the goods today.
We have a new, hang on, let me exit this. Oh, I want this. This is your clinician control screen. Protocol designer, trainee setup, boards and tiers. So if I take you to boards and tiers, I can go to my fleet status. It's loading my fleet. And here's my fleet. These are all different platforms. They include PCs, standalone boards, and these are all the ones I control. I can set up unit tests. I can actually send a unit test to a board and tell it to go run a test. So I could see how it's passed all these tests. When you have a client in the field, and BrainMaster is going to love this too, we can send a unit test to a unit in the field and see if that discovery worked or not. And the unit test review selected even includes a frequency response plot.
Nice.
It actually tests the discovery all the way up to 46 hertz and makes sure that the response is clean. So when we're doing tech support, often we'll say, put on your self-cal, run a calibration test. This does it automatically and sends us the results. And we can even do it while you're asleep. So this is the fleet control with the unit testing. I can set the tiers. There are tiers. Home 1 can run sessions. Home 2 can run sessions and see their files. Clinician 1, which is I am set up right now as a Clinician 1, I can run local studies. A Clinician 2 can run a LAN fleet, a fleet on your Wi-Fi. So if you have a clinic with any number of systems, you can control them all from here. A Clinician 3 can have a remote fleet. You can have a fleet controlled in other countries. Clinician 4 is a fleet administrator. Clinician 5 is the super admin. So this whole concept then is based on a fleet. The fleets are registered. If I check the registration, I have the name of the board, I have the clinician, I have its IP address, I know when it was used. So now we have a beautiful internet-based networked ability. Here's my friend Kristen, her machine. All of these are on fleet status control. I can watch them. I have a dashboard. If they're on the LAN, I can hit dashboard and I can see them right away just like that. So that's the fleet status. And if I back up again, now I'm going to show you the new EEG video review. We're introducing video as a standard now when doing EEG. Let me see if it wakes up. Okay, open recording. I am going to go to this recording. See, it just made a folder for biofeedback for me. It was very considerate. This works with BrainMaster studies. It all integrates beautifully. But let me look at this one then. I'm going to look at my eyes open. And in the new viewer, you get built-in video with your EEG standard. So now you see me sitting there looking at stuff. It has the ability to add markers. It can go previous marker, next marker. I just automatically marked all the eye blinks. So for example, I could clear the auto markers. Now there's no more marks. I right click and I say detect eye blinks. And there they are. Mark 275 eye blinks. And so I can go through them. If I don't like it, I can just click on it and I can delete the marker just like that. So I have navigation. I can use next marker to go to the next marker. And as you see, up on top, we have two AI engines running. The top left is classifying the EEG, and the top right is classifying the video. And the video capability can recognize blinks, expressions. Here it says I'm neutral. At one point, it's going to say there's eyes closed. It marks it surprised. It thinks I'm surprised. See how I'm looking up suddenly? So our new concept is video EEG should become standard for routine EEGs. And I showed this morning to our EEG team and said, don't you think when you're reviewing any routine EEG, wouldn't it be better to have the video? And the answer is absolutely. We look at an EEG and we don't know. Are they blinking? Are they nodding off? What are they doing? So look at this. I can even hit play. And now it's as if I am there watching myself. I'm not as handsome as some people, but I should have a better model. But now you see it's classifying, it's finding the blinks. And it has montage, reformatting, sensitivity, gain, all the other things you expect in a EEG viewer. So we're kind of excited about now having a new standard. We're adding emotional recognition and we're adding gaze control. So this could be used for neuromarketing. It would also be wonderful to use with a Rover or any type of intervention because you literally see where the intervention is, what's going on, what's happening. And with no additional hardware, just using this BrainMaster software, as long as your PC has a camera, you are now able to do video EEG. And I think that's probably the way it should have been done all along, but the technology didn't allow it. Now the technology allows it. So video EEG is coming as part of BrainMaster, along with AI to scan your EEG, AI to scan the video. And Penijean, as a rehab counselor, I can imagine you could probably think of a dozen ways that this is useful for interventions, monitoring, keeping track of your clients. And keep in mind, this can I see, I just moved my nose, so I could say that, I could stop that and say, okay, here's where touches nose. Here it is. Oh, there it is, touches nose. So I can add a marker and just say touched my nose right here. And I can pick the channels and what it says and all that kind of great stuff. So
Tom, you have a question in the chat concerning what kind of security do we have for sending this brain data over the web. Can you identify that and talk about that a little bit? Yeah, the data isn't really sent over the web. It's sent using a double encrypted secure email backbone, which is fully encrypted, and the messages only exist on your machines. They don't exist on a server or a website or anything like that. What we've created is a peer-to-peer communication capability. So as long as your machine is secure, your client's machine is secure, they both have the ability to use email. We use a secret double encrypted backbone that then transfers it, and it just lands on your machine and the email is deleted. So here's the model I'm using. I'll say it in words. Someday I'll make a picture. There's a post office with a post office box. On the left is a notepad with a pencil, and on the right is a shredder. If you want to send a message to Sally, you take the notepad and you write, Sally, please run these sessions, and you open it up and you put it in the post box and you close the post box and walk away.
Sally walks up to the post box. She opens it up, looks at the message, and goes, here's a message for me. She reads the message and immediately puts it in the shredder. So you have communicated with Sally without anybody having public access and without anything being stored anywhere. So that's the model. That's the BrainMaster model. It's a post office box with a notepad and a shredder.
Awesome.
And you can use it completely locally. You do not have to use any of the networking capabilities. You can just download BrainMaster, have BrainMaster, use it for video EEGs, use it for neurofeedback, use it for training, use it for biofeedback. It has a lot of other features as well. You can still control it from your phone, even if you just want to have a single station. So it's perfectly scalable from one station. It works perfectly as one station to a fleet in a clinic to a global fleet.
Alrighty. Tom, I'm going to ask you to stop there, and I apologize to jump in on you, but we want to get back to Penny a little bit.
We will. I wanted to make sure we covered everything, so I'm going to stop.
I think that was a great.
That's an interlude.
Yeah. Alrighty. Got a little excited there, I think. Alrighty. Fantastic. Penny, back to you.
It is very exciting because a big part of what Tom was showing everybody is essentially what we're trying to do to level up, like kind of 2 or 3 specific things. One is there's been a lot of asks since obviously 2020 for more remote training or potential more remote support. And so something like the BrainMaster is going to make that much easier to do on the BrainMaster platform. The other thing that is happening is the protocol suites that I'm going to be dropping in the next couple of months that we're talking about. I am going to make versions of those protocols that should be compatible with pretty much everything we've already got out. But I'm also working on versions of those protocols that are going to be compatible and with and take advantage of some of the newer displays and features coming as well. So regardless of what you have, it should work with as long as you've got like some Z-score DLL action happening, then I've got versions for Surface, SLoretta, and connectivity Z-score DLL options. So if you don't have to buy anything new to use at least some versions of these protocols. However, I'm also working to make adaptive versions for the newer features, because part of what Dr. Gennardi had been asking about was, okay, so we can pick frequencies, we can do stuff, like how are we supposed to see or know what it's actually doing? And there are 2 ways we try to do that. One is using live displays, like what's happening in real time while we do stuff during a session. And the other one is doing intermittent, kind of more regular data sampling over time. And we know it's a little bit, it's a little bit, what's what I'm looking for, a little bit laborious to some of us to try to do full QEG regularly, like more regularly. So if you're not hooking them up to the full 19 channel, I think it's not a bad idea every time you hook somebody up to a full 19 channel, go ahead and get a couple minutes of EEG that you just put into the archives, whether you actually analyze it or not down the road. It's not a bad idea. But trying to figure out how to do data sampling and baselining over time, I think there's arguments for watching real-time data. I think there's a very good argumentation for doing baselines over time, because the static baselines are an apples-to-apples situation. So you can say, this is what you look like, and then I did a bunch of sessions, and this is what you look like, or I did 2 sessions, and this is what you look like. I think for some people, the static baseline comparisons are a little bit easier to wrap our brains around. However, having said that, I'm going to reshare. Yoink. Because I promised you what I was going to do was play back an actual EEG and talk about how you can use some of the displays available and interact with the protocols and make some more customized decisions. Because, and I'm going to go ahead and click playback. This is a real EEG file, and it's going to behave as if real EEG is coming in. There will still be some other limitations, but you'll at least be able to see what the displays are supposed to look like, and we'll discuss how you can use them for optimizing outcomes. One of the things that I will say, and I know I said this before, I'm going to restate it possibly again before the end of the webinar. Every protocol I give you, no matter how many features or plugins it has, you should be able to simply load in to your folder, hook them up at the appropriate places, plug in whatever you do or don't want, and simply click go. And it should do something useful and helpful without you having to change or adjust or even mess with anything. So for example, if I give you a I think pretty much all these Rover protocols will probably end up being set to contingent default. Right now I'm showing you a 19 channel like S-Loretta protocol. The S-Loretta protocol suite, I haven't decided how many protocols in each of the suite sections I'm going to drop, but it'll be between 8 and 12, which means every protocol will have a different arrangement of ROIs to emphasize different hubs or networks or things that we would like to pay attention to. And that means depending on what we want for that protocol to do we want like faster processing, more cognitive capability? Do we want more relaxation and deceleration of that central nervous system arousal response? Whatever it is that we are trying to do, each protocol will be set up to feature that. And that means that the selection of the default frequency, and I'm going to just for my own little sake over here, the selection of the default frequency that comes loaded to pulse whatever sim option you decide to pulse will be set. So it'll be like 10 hertz, 12 hertz, 15 hertz, 40 hertz, 37 hertz, maybe a 24 in there. But the specific default loaded pulse frequency will purposefully mirror whenever that, audio visual feedback drops out, what would we like the brain to kick into or maybe be encouraged to hang out in which frequency range? Again, it's not that simplistic, but there is a frequency following element that does shine through in some of these, especially I was saying the pulse CMF element, right? So, because I think the microteslas will probably be what a lot of people end up using with the Rover as one of the more easier modulatory closed loop options to plug in and run. If you're going to do 19 channel Z-score, I do genuinely think it's going to be easier to take one or two coils, probably loop them over the back of the chair, and just create a general field kick on and off. But if you're going to do a 4-channel or a 6-channel protocol, each one of those are going to have a different arrangement of sensor sites, obviously, and then there will be suggestions for placement for 1 or 2 microteslas. So do we want to do a sensory motor strip like that protocol that we looked at and potentially put a microtesla in the front and one in the back? Do we want to do some right down the middle and put a couple microteslas maybe at T5, T6? Like there's going to be sensor site placements. We'll be doing the network Z-score stuff. And then there will be recommendations for where to potentially put the microteslas. And then there will be a default frequency setup saying that if you change nothing about this protocol, here's what it should help you be able to do. The reason I think it was great, Tom showed us all of that, and the reason that I am kind of going into this level of detail is, as some of you know, after doing this for some 20 years, you know that I'm also a huge fan of essentially I love a high sampling rate QEEG situation where I hook somebody up and I run some stuff and then I do multiple QEEGs maybe over the course of an hour or two, sometimes even 5, 10, 15 minutes. Like I want to see what's happening dynamically. That's part of what Dick was saying about how can we tell what's going on. I do want to see dynamic change. I think it's relevant. I think it's a different thing to look at than static baseline over time. So I want you guys to also just consider this completely valid for you to do, a map or some type of evaluation every 5 to 10 to 15 sessions and just track that, potential symptom set that you're trying to observe to see if you're seeing change in. But the protocol designs that I will be making, the relevance of the decisions will be to try to capture what are the roughly half a dozen main reasons people come in to see you, right? They're too wound up, they can't calm down. They're too disengaged, they can't engage and get, they can't focus. Like what are the handful of things people can't do? They have no state flexibility. They're too cognitively rigid. They have no emotional stability. Like, I mean, there's like, we can kind of categorically bin out the handful of main load-bearing complaints in the framework that people are going to introduce themselves to you with. And then, we've got sort of the subtle variability of how different brains show up, being too depressed, too anxious, too stressed out, too, unable to focus, etc. The lovely thing about the brain maps or various different assessments is we can get some of that detail, but ultimately, almost always it comes down to we need more local or network flexibility. We need more brain power, literally more metabolic availability of resources, and we need more processing speed. That's kind of almost it for everybody. And so we do that by trying to encourage that synaptogenesis, the building of new network connections. It's part of what Dr. Gennardi was talking about, wanting to be able to observe potentially in real time, but also it's what's driving. I'm going to do a little peek behind the curtain, and by that, most of you guys have seen me bang on about these screens where we can pick the stuff that goes into our protocols, that goes into our pile. Oh, I love this for me. It's because I've been doing too many things in a row. This is because I picked a playback without actually closing out. Fussy. And you know what? I'm going to risk it again because I want you to be sitting on the ROIZ tab with me when we go back and look at it. All right, so hang out here, blue setup button. Wait a minute for that to load. Part of the reason this is a little slow is just because I have too many things running on my machine. And I think a lot of my storage is just really full. I'll be honest, I generate about probably 2 terabytes of data every 6 months, and if I don't clean off my machine regularly, it lags a little. Okay, so if we go into settings and we go over to the z-scores and the ROI select tab, as you guys know, when we're doing a surface z-score training, whatever we stick in the LZT train column is whatever we acquire, and whatever we stick here is essentially what the feedback is going to be based off of. You'll notice I don't have any surface z-scores. This is where you'll be potentially doing things with a 4 or a 6 or maybe an 8-channel protocol, right? 2-channel protocol even. I'm pointing it out because I think Tom, Dave Cantor, Bill Brubaker, there's a handful of us who are all doing some workshops at ISNR on cross-frequency coupling. It's been sexy the last couple of years. I think it's really kind of come to the forefront because the technology is finally catching up with conceptually what we'd like to be able to do and observe and look at and measure in real time. The only reason I'm bringing that up is because I think we can do some baby cross-frequency coupling. We can access those principles and lean into them. For example, if you've got a 4-channel z-score protocol, you've plugged your Rover into it, you're running like a 10 hertz off, and I'm just using 10 hertz as an easy, accessible example. You're running 10 hertz off the micro Tesla, right? So every time you drop out of the audio visual feedback, the 10 hertz kicks on. And so you basically have like a nice little balance going. But you can come into your Surface Z-Score interface and you can be like, you know what I'd really like to do is I would just like to seriously create like an alpha network. I want to just create like an alpha network. So I want to do a couple sessions where I'm doing nothing but 10 hertz and alpha. And then what I want to do, now that I've like really kind of solidified an alpha feedback, is now I want to drop a gamma in there and do an alpha gamma coupling session. And what you can do is you can pick the 2 frequencies you want to encourage the feedback to be based on their interaction and pairing together. And then I'm just going to use these settings temporarily. And then you can come over here and you can spend part of the session running 10 hertz. And then after a little bit, you can just take these two, bump them up to 40 or 45 or whatever gamma range you would like for it to work with. Do a little bit at 40. And then if you want to be real fancy, I'm not even going to try to get them close. My fingers are too twitchy and I'm using the trackpad. Get them up to 40. And then if you want to be real fancy, you can run one at 10 and one at 40. And then you can swap them. Like you can actually create the encouragement to hang out in a frequency range while selecting sensor sites and then selecting which frequencies. I'm going to go back to the blue setup button. I'm going to hang over here, ROIC, go back to the blue setup button and go back to our Z-score tab. What you can do is you can encourage, remember everything you add, like everything you select is what you're asking the brain to prioritize because the feedback will be based in changes of those metrics. So you've got a nice big pile of metrics. You've got like the widest amount of context, the most play and flexibility, right? You know, this is why we love selecting everything, is because if you select everything, the brain's got a lot of choices for how it's going to respond to and repair and wire and network build. But you can specify out, remember I'm a big fan of specificity, you can specify out which frequency ranges you would like to have to focus on, and then you can pair up your stem frequencies with those ranges. And not just with the surface, like this is where you would do it if it was like a 4 or 6 or 8 channel. If you come over to what we're doing with the 19 channel and the ROIZ, now here's where I'm going to tell you, look. I don't know if they have fixed this in some of the newer versions, and I wouldn't even say it's a problem so much as an opportunity for us to make granular decisions. But you can also come over here into your ROIZ options, and you can unclick everything but your alphas, and you can run a region of interest. I'm going to, for example, you can run, I'm going to use these settings so you guys can see, because right now, oh, it's not going to let me till I totally update it, which is fine. What'll happen is that you can unclick and then only base feedback off of the alpha metrics of any of these regions of interest, which means you can build an alpha only region of interest network, add in a theta, add in a delta, whatever you want. You can create your own inferred frequency coupling protocol by just asking or prioritizing what the feedback is based on, which you can do. Now, obviously, in this context, you're going to go in here and you're going to make some kind of, you're going to have to actually, manually select out what you want. One of the things you can do, which does make it easier, you can just unclick all of them and then just select. If you just want like 2 or 3, you can unclick all of them. You will have to do it manually if you want to do something like that. So I recommend if you build a protocol you really like, go ahead and export those settings and keep it. And then you can fiddle with it, import that in and adjust it for future clients. I've done this a number of times. I've got like a little library of what I consider to be very granular, customized protocols that I get wonderful results out of. And Tom was saying the tag protocol, theta, alpha, gamma, you can make your own tag protocol. And I had promised I would take a look over here at the Z-score coherent stuff, because the other thing you can do is put any combination of like, let's be crazy here. And choose anterior cingulate left to anterior cingulate right. We can put in any of the vectors we want where we're looking at Z-score coherence between a couple of ROIs. Just doing this for an example. And I can also just choose my alpha metrics for a session or two, add in theta, add in gamma, and then I can literally use my frequency selections with my stem to encourage in similar frequency ranges and support this type of cross-frequency coupling behavior. Now, why would we do this? There's a couple things to consider. If you only do one frequency, whether it's at 2 locations or just one, whether you've got 1 microtesla or 2 microteslas, and you put them in different locations or you just use one, 2 microteslas will be exponentially more powerful. It's not quite double, it's exponential. You put 2 little fields together, they're going to overlap and expo. But if you use 2, it'll be more powerful. I do recommend maybe the first couple times you run anybody on pulse EMF, you do fairly low power, maybe just 1 microtesla coil, and then you ramp them up a little bit over time. The amount of minutes you do in a session, the amount of power you do in the coil, how many coils you do. I don't think it is unreasonable to take about 5 to 10 sessions to kind of ramp them up as you go. Some people will absolutely tolerate the pulse EMF much better than other people, just depending on how compromised or resource low or fatigued their individual system is, right? Like what kind of metabolic loads that they're dealing with. So think of everything you add in as just things that require resources to process. So every sensory input or every element of feedback is just another thing you're asking the brain to keep track of and respond to. So, the more stuff you add in, the more you're asking the brain to do, the less stuff or the lower power, the less resource ask for it to engage in the learning process, right? So starting off a little gently and then ramping up over a handful of sessions is, I think, kind of the ideal way to do it, especially if you're working with somebody a little bit new you're not familiar with. The reason I'm showing you guys this is just because the actual protocol designs that I give you will have all of this thought out, pre-decided on, so that you can just load it and go. But also, I think it's really valid and a little bit fun for you to be able to treat those protocols like templates, where you can come in here and click on or choose or deselect, make like this is a total amount of z-scores, right? Or the amount of metrics that go into the pile. I think it's very reasonable for you to be able to add or subtract and kind of customize it yourself based on what you're potentially seeing in your maps, and also no changes. Also, what you're potentially seeing in your real-time live displays. Because I promise I'd pop over here and talk a little bit about how even just using this guy might be relevant. I think that the displays that Tom was showing you, the new ones that are coming out, are very I'm looking for a word that's more exciting than exciting. Exciting is what I want to say. But I think there's just like so much tremendous potential for your individual creativity in interpretation. Part of the reason that, like if you don't have access to a way to look at a data display in real time, how are you supposed to come up with your own understanding in application of how people's brains work in sessions, right? So I think there's a lot of validity in using pre-post session baselines, but I also think that in real time, and apologies, there's just a lot happening with the Zoom interface. I'm going to, this is utilizing the z-score source. So that means that the colors are going to represent, potential normative ranges according to the SLRETA database. I'm going to actually put everything for a second, give it a second to haze in. And I think I'm going to just put the electrodes in just for help with orientation. Right now, we're looking at an alpha component. You'll notice that alpha looks crazy in the front of this brain. I put the top ends of the color at 3.0 standard deviations. I kind of slid the color bar around so that now the standard deviation normative ranges, anything that's above 3.0 standard deviations plus is going to show up as white. So we've got at least 3 plus standard deviations of alpha happening here. Part of the reason I chose this as a playback was because I have a fun little case study to show you. I've been talking a lot about pulse EMF, which I'm a huge fan of. And I consider pulse EMF to be a little bossier than photobiomodulation. I consider photobiomodulation to be just a little, I wouldn't say easier to ignore, but just like maybe not as intense, right? Obviously, we can power level up and down, but I would say photobiomodulation is easier. Pulse EMF is harder for the brain to really ignore it, but also it just means it's like just like a slightly higher metabolic or resource load sometimes on people to process pulse EMF information, right? Photobiomodulation is, I think, sometimes considered too low power to have any real effects. So whichever direction you go, somebody's going to complain about something. But I am showing you the real EEG of a little case I did. Let me go back to that. Where I remember I showed you the intranasal LED that I was playing around with a little bit, and plugged in to show you. So I took that same like kind of S-Loretta model where I was like, all right, can we, like, this is the same protocol, right? But what I did is I took that same protocol and I hooked somebody up, kind of looked at their brain a little bit, and I said, all right, you know what? Here's what we're gonna pick. This is what we picked for the ROIZ, and then this is what we picked potentially for the S-Loretta connectivity, the Z-squared coherence, because I promised I'd give you versions that also had the connectivity in it, right? And when I say connectivity, when we're looking at this part of an when we're basing feedback off of these S-Loretta regions of interest, the ROIs, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, I'm gonna come right back here. I'm gonna literally pull up the anterior cingulate. Right now we're looking at the whole thing, but let's just be we're literally just kidding, let's do the insula. We're saying, okay, out of the actual number of voxels that make up what we're estimating the insula to be comprised of, every single one of these voxels, we're looking at the full frequency range activity, the current source density probability in every single one of these voxels in all the frequency ranges. So when we say, what's it doing in alpha? Every single one of these voxels has an alpha, like a literal nano, hang on, nano amperage. I did it. Each one of these has a nano amperage amp for power, right? So we're doing essentially a localized power metric value. And depending on how that power is increasing or decreasing, the density of the current source, probability, as we're estimating that power is increasing and decreasing in a local region. So we're basically doing local power training. And the lovely thing is being able to do a Z-score. We don't have to worry about, training up and training down, right? We don't have to worry about going in the wrong direction a little too far. We can do that nice range training and say, when you come within the range of power we'd expect in alpha, in what we think your insula basically is, then this is how you're meeting the criterion to get the feedback, right? So then when we pick a bunch of regions of interest, this is basically like super sexy power training. So when we do an increase and decrease of power on the surface, we're looking at those microvolts, and then we're looking at those nanoamps down at the little itty bitty voxels, where it's the same principle. We're looking for that kind of increase decrease in power. One of the things that's lovely about doing the ROIZ straight up region of interest training is that you get stuff down at the bottom of the brain and you're like, hey, there's not enough activity here. Can you come up within the range? I think sometimes we really forget about the potential efficacy of if you've got a low power brain, because it's so much easier to work with a high power, like it's red everywhere. One of the natural things neurofeedback helps do is if there's that constant cortical over-arousal, and you put like Z-score training on it, Z-score training can be, we're not fighting like live inflammation or infection. Z-score training can be almost miraculous in 5 to 10 sessions, bringing down some of that cortical over-arousal, especially if it's global and diffuse. Like you will see those numbers come down. You will see the brain calm down because we're asking it to come within like a more reasonable range. But the other half of that, which we don't talk about as much, is if you are underpowered, especially at the lower parts of your cortex where we are trying to recruit resources up for utilization. You can get some of those lower cortical regions and ask for increases in power. So that power increase and decrease, using the ROIs is like one of the most effective ways to use it. But what we are still working with implicit, not explicit connections, right? Just like if you do surface amplitude training and you do a couple sites, we're not explicitly doing, connectivity unless we're actually, asking for a connected metric between them, right? So if you do power training at 2 sites, if you're doing it at the same time in the same frequency band, that is a Hebbian, what fires together, wires together principle of inferred connection, but it's not explicit. If you do a coherence training between 2 sites, that is an explicit connection, right? So the power training with Yasoretta is very effective, especially depending on what you pick and how you use it. But the ROI Z-score coherence training allows for us to be explicit about what we're asking to interact or pair together. And this is where we were talking earlier about the cross-frequency coupling, because cross-frequency coupling is not uncoupled from a location in space. You have to measure the frequency at a location, and then you have to measure the frequency at another location, and then those 2 frequency behaviors is what we're coupling to get the cross frequency, right? So when we're thinking about how do we actually ask the brain to wire things together or build network potential or repair something, having the explicit Z-scored coherence allows for a little bit more emphasis, right? And so the reason I'm showing you this is because this was a little protocol that I put together where I essentially took these regions of interest and I said, all right, let's do the anterior cingulate to the precuneus. You know where the precuneus is? The back here at the parietal cortex. You know where the anterior cingulate is? Like the bottom of the frontal cortex. This is a vector, bottom of the frontal cortex, back to top of the parietal. Anterior cingulate left, anterior cingulate right, right to left. Vector right here, local. Anterior cingulate left to precuneus right. Now I've gone diagonal. Anterior cingulate left and right. So I did anterior cingulate left to precuneus right, anterior cingulate right to precuneus left, nice little chiastic, and then I did anterior cingulate to insula. Okay, I have basically crisscrossed insula, anterior cingulate, and precuneus. What's the precuneus? Why do we care? I feel like insula is pretty obvious for most of us because there's quite a bit of cortical to subcortical circuitry there, but there's also a lot of cortical to subcortical circuitry from the anterior cingulate. So when we're actually thinking, how do you orient in space, and what are the higher parts of your brain that go all the way down right to the brainstem, potentially to those colliculi, then, anterior cingulate has a lot of circuitry. So does the insula, especially for like reactive and emotional regulation. We talk about those. The precuneus, though, houses a lot of environmental awareness and vigilance and that capacity to differentiate between self and others. So a lot of our environmental scanning that we're doing also requires that precuneus participation. So if you really want top vigilance management, this is one of those networks, right? So you take somebody who's just on all the time and cannot chill out. We get a hold of that vigilance network, and then we stick an LED up their nose and we pulse 10 hertz. What happens to their brain? So this is the brain we're looking at. This is the one we're doing playback. I took a couple screenshots. See that frontal alpha? This is alpha 1. This is slow alpha. So this is their frontal alpha. This is just a couple screenshots over the course of like the time I had them hooked up. But here's what I'm going to show you, and you guys let me know. I know you can't really see these numbers. That is okay. You don't have to actually physically see these numbers. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. But this protocol setup that I'm showing you, this is the same thing as the protocol that we've been looking at, all I've done is I've just, selected out a subselection of the regions of S-Loretta regions of interest, and I've added in some explicit vector coherence, left, right, front, back, side, side, up, down. I've added in some explicit vector coherence. And this was what was running. This was the feedback while we were doing a 10 hertz LED in the nose. This is the alpha peak frequency report from the QEEG Pro report generator. This is essentially what their baseline was before we started the session. So if we were going to look at their alpha peak frequency, you can see there was a trend towards running a little on the fast half, right? See these 10s and 11s and 12s? So we have somebody who little vigilant running on the fast half. This is eyes open, okay? We put the photobiomodulation at 10 hertz. We put the LED in the left side of their nose. This is what their brain did while it was in the left side of their nose. We did that for a few minutes, collected some data. That's what turned in to this. Then we swapped it over to the right side of their nose. This is RN for right nasal, right? Swap the LED over to the right side of their nose. This is what it looked like while it was on the right side of their nose. And then this is probably about 10 minutes after we stopped the entire session, gave it just a little bit to stabilize. And if you look at this, here's what's really, I think, kind of particularly interesting. Because part of what Dr. Gennardi was saying earlier was, well, how are we supposed to know what's going on in real time? And I'm like, well, if you want to be a freak like me and take a bunch of data while it's happening and then do a ton of analysis later, you can. But this was pre-any stem. This was while doing the S-Loretta and the stem, left nasal, right nasal, and then about 10 minutes after completely, I think we ran maybe 20 minutes the whole session. The only reason I'm showing you this is because I think the photobiomodulation is honestly less intense than the pulse CMF. If you're getting this much response in real time just from one LED in the nose, you can imagine the potential for just the pulse CMF, right? I've done a number of pulse CMF maps as well over the years, but this is just these recent development protocols, maybe the last year or so, that I've been pulling S-Loretta stuff together and saying, okay, how can I maybe create some of these little specific targeted networks? This is somebody who doesn't relax. They do not have an off switch. I mean, look, I respect the Energizer Bunny community. It's not me. But the reason I'm showing you this is because we did this 20 minutes on this protocol, played around a little bit just with the photobiomodulation, and then he was chill for like the next 4 days.
Penny, can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
What is so beautiful about what you're showing here is photobiomodulation is basically just a food for the brain. And what it does is it ups the current source density all over. So what you're doing is you're taking that capacity and then making sure that it doesn't go out of bounds. With PEMF, we can drive different and specific frequencies. All photobiomodulation does is it ups everything. So it's going to up things that are not good too. And that's why I like so much this beautiful protocol that you've put together, because it shows exactly the impact and when you need to stop. It's beautifully done.
I was very impressed. Thank you, Dick. I was very impressed how his brain kind of restabilized back to its tendency, right? Like, obviously, we weren't expecting to change 43 years of habit in one 20-minute session. I was very interested in what it did in real time because here's the thing, I've done a lot of photobiomodulation or pulse CMF or what, like I've done a lot of just looking at what the stem in isolation does pre-post brain. Starting to see how much more differently, much more specific and targeted you can make the brain respond to or utilize the input from the pulse CMF or the photobiomodulation or whatever it is we're introducing in as a stem. Instead of having, and this is what I think we've all loved about Z-score training from the initial advent of it, was this idea of being able to combine giving the brain some options and some choices with giving it some guardrails. And essentially allowing for the range to be defined by whatever the metrics are we're picking. So whether it's a couple of surface sites or some regions of interest or whatever we're doing with the coherent stuff, we are actually, the specificity is what did you choose to point it at? What did you include or exclude? Because whatever you click is what you get, right? And so if you unclick everything in a 4-channel surface Z-score except for the 3 alpha metrics, you're going to have an alpha protocol, right? And so this really allows for, like, this is why I said from the very beginning, the specificity means we don't need to blast people. There's no need to blast anybody. Part of the reason I think this has ended up being, and again, this is not even like a negative or critical statement, so much as an observation of just we all work with the tools that we have. I think a lot of people doing various types of STEM, especially with the more powerful devices, they only have a couple of options. They've got like maybe a 10 hertz and a 12 hertz and maybe a, those big RTMS or like, there's a lot of fairly stronger STEM options. Some of those genuinely heat your brain up. Like transcranial direct current stimulation heats up your brain. Well, that's how you get it moving. Lovely. Like, who doesn't love a warm hot pack? Like, that's how you get things moving and activated. But if there's too much compromise, if the brain's too compromised, then it just has a much lower threshold for that activation that creates the thermal threshold that potentially tips over into the negative outcomes, right? So when we're working with a much lower power, we don't have that concern in the same way. And that means when we're not getting the outcomes we want, we can change, we can update the networks, we can try different EEG locations, and we can, change frequencies. This gives us way more flexibility with a much lower threshold of potential harm. Much higher potential for actual efficacious outcome. And so as I've been trying to be more and more specific, this is part of the reason you guys are seeing S. Loretta stuff today, right? I did not expect this little, vigilance network, my little chill out for a minute protocol with a little 10 hertz on top of it. I didn't expect that. I was like, yeah, we're going to see stuff happen in the session. That'll be kind of interesting. I didn't expect the level of response in the session we got. And I didn't expect the effect. I mean, honestly, it probably went a couple of weeks just from the one session, although I think most distinctly the first few days. So the reason I'm even telling you guys all of this is that I think that there is a very natural pairing between lower power STEM with the higher specificity and then the sophistication of what we can do with the EEG software. So the designs that I'm trying to push out to you guys within the next couple months, obviously we'll try to get these demo designs out to you to play with in the next week or two. But the ones the little suites I'm trying to push out are trying to take into account, we've got the potential to do this. You don't have to think through all these variables. I've been doing it for a few years. I'm going to give you the stuff, like the protocols I've been using that I think have the best possible outcomes for the most amount of people. You can play around with them, and then you can make your own adjustments or customizations when you get comfortable or when you have a reason. That was pretty much everything I wanted to cover. what kind of questions do you guys have? And I know we're right at time. So I just want to make sure if there's anything specific outstanding or any housekeeping stuff that we have a minute to do that. So summary is you'll get designs that have already been thought through, tested out a little bit, sometimes tested out extensively, with a little description about what you should in theory be able to use it for, to potentially support people being able to do more of or do less of. And then even those designs should have customizable options so that if you like it, but you want to tweak it, then you can, and then save your own versions.
Fantastic. Well, we want to thank you, Penny. That was awesome. A lot of info. Fire hose for sure. That's why it's good that things are recorded. But it doesn't look like I don't really see any ingredients. There is a question. Maybe you can talk a little bit about where people can find you, social media and things like that, if you'd like. A question on where to contact you and such.
I'm going to drop it in the chat.
Perfect.
Your
I know
best
people
friend.
are, sorry, I know
Go.
people are talking about prices and things for the new software. We are going to release that. We're holding all that for ISNR. So you guys got like this absolute unexpected sneak peek. So we're going to ask you a little bit to kind of hold on there. We're only a few weeks away, but there is quite a bit. Tom showed you a portion, but there is quite a bit on the release horizon, both in the hardware and software category. So we're super excited, but we are going to hold those kind of as that launch event. But thanks again. Anyone else? You see her brainstar.innovations@gmail for anybody asking contact wise.
Heather is the penny wrangler. She's a
There you
person who's
go.
been working with me for a few years. She's my admin. And if you are trying to reach out to me and you are not getting a hold of me, because at this point I am so inundated across the majority of my platforms, it's very challenging to keep up with that. If you are not getting a hold of me, send her an email because she is really good at literally being like, girl, this person's been trying to get a hold of you for 3 weeks. What is wrong with you? And making sure that she continuously puts it back in front of me until I reply. I deeply appreciate her. You guys have been wonderful. Super attentive.
Thank you all.
So
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Wonderful work.
If
Thank you.
I'm not mistaken, I'll be
See you
working.
at ISNR.
Yes, I'll be working with the BrainMaster tech team to get a couple emails pushed out to you guys in the next week or two that says we've put up the recordings of the videos and here's how you can get your copies of the protocols that we were demoing. We are working on that. It is coming. If you have signed up, you will be getting that email to let you know how to do it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a great one. Take care now.
Thank you all.
Mhm.